and that the keyboard displays a Done button. This is the principle behind these changes. Because you know at design time what type of information a text field will contain, you can configure it so that its runtime appearance and behavior are well suited to the user's task. You make all of these configuration changes in the Attributes Inspector. To configure the text field, in the view, select the text field. In the Text Field Attributes Inspector, make the following choices. In the Capitalization pop-up menu, choose Words. Ensure that the keyboard pop-up menu is set to default. In the Return Key pop-up menu, choose Done. After you make these choices, the Text Field Attributes Inspector should look like this. Run your app in Simulator to make sure that the UI elements you added look the way you expect them to. If you click the Hello button, it should highlight. And if you click inside the text field, the keyboard should appear. At the moment, though, the button doesn't do anything. The label just displays label, and there's no way to dismiss the keyboard after it appears. To add the functionality you want, you need to make the appropriate connections between the UI elements and the view controller. These connections are described next. Because you're running the app in Simulator, and not on a device, you activate controls by clicking them instead of tapping them. When the user activates a UI element, the element can send an action message to an object that knows how to perform the corresponding action method, such as add this contact to the user's list of contacts. This interaction is part of the target action mechanism, which is another Cocoa Touch design pattern. In this tutorial, when the user taps the Hello button, you want it to send a Change the Greeting message, the action, to the view controller, the target. This message changes the string, that is, the model object, that the view controller manages. Then, the view controller updates the text that's displayed in the label to reflect the change in the model object's value. Using Xcode, you can add an action to a UI element and set up its corresponding action method by control-dragging from the element on the canvas to the appropriate source file, typically a view controller source file. The storyboard archives the connections that you create in this way. Later, when the app loads the storyboard, the connections are restored. To add an action for the button, if necessary, select Main Storyboard in the Project Navigator to display the scene on the canvas. In the Xcode toolbar, click the Utilities button to hide the Utilities area, and click the Assistant Editor button to display the Assistant Editor pane. Make sure that the Assistant displays the view controller's header file, that is, Hello World View Controller H. On the canvas, control-drag from the Hello button to the method declaration area in Hello World View Controller H, that is, between the add interface statement and the add in statement. To control-drag, press and hold the Control key while you drag from the button to the header file in the Assistant Editor pane. As you control-drag, you should see something like this. When you release the control-drag, Xcode displays a popover in which you can configure the action connection you just made. If you release the control-drag somewhere other than in the method declaration area of Hello World View Controller H, you might see a different type of popover, or nothing at all. If this happens, click inside the view on the canvas to close the popover, if necessary, and try control-dragging again. In the popover, configure the button's action connection. In the Connection pop-up menu, choose Action. In the Name field, enter Change Greeting, be sure to include the colon. In a later step, you'll implement the Change Greeting method so that it takes the text that the user enters into the text field and displays it in the label. Make sure that the type field contains ID. The ID data type can represent any Cocoa object. You want to use ID here because it doesn't matter what type of object sends the message. Make sure that the event pop-up menu contains touch-up inside. You specify the touch-up inside event because you want the message to be sent when the user lifts the finger inside the button. Make sure that the arguments pop-up menu contains sender. After you configure the action connection, the popover should look like this. In the popover, click Connect. Xcode adds a stub implementation of the new change greeting method and indicates that the connection has been made by displaying a filled in circle to the left of the method. When you Control-dragged from the Hello button to the Hello World View Controller H file and configured the resulting action, you accomplished two things. You added the appropriate code to the View Controller class. Specifically, you added the following action method declaration to Hello World View Controller H and caused Xcode to add the following stub implementation to Hello World View Controller M. IB action is a special keyword that is used to tell Xcode to treat a method as an action for target action connections. IB action is defined to void. The sender parameter in the action method refers to the object that is sending the action message. In this tutorial, the sender is the button. You created a connection between the button and the view controller. Next, you create connections between the view controller and the two remaining UI elements, that is, the label and the text field. An outlet describes a connection between two objects. When you want an object, such as the view controller, to communicate with an object that it contains, such as the text field, you designate the contained object as an outlet. When the app runs, the outlet you create in Xcode is restored, which allows the objects to communicate with each other at runtime. In this tutorial, you want the view controller to get the user's text from the text field and then display the text in the label. To ensure that the view controller can communicate with these objects, you create outlet connections between them. The steps you take to add outlets for the text field and label are very similar to the steps you took when you added the button's action. Before you start, make sure that the main storyboard file is still visible on the canvas and that Hello World View Controller H is still open in the Assistant Editor. To add an outlet for the text field, Control-drag from the text field in the view to the method declaration area in the header file. As you Control-drag, you should see something like this. It does not matter where you release the Control-drag as long as it's inside the method declaration area. In this tutorial, the outlet declarations for the text field and the label are shown above the method declaration for the Hello button. In the popover that appears when you release the Control-drag, configure the text field's connection. Make sure that the connection pop-up menu contains outlet. In the name field, enter text field. You can call the outlet whatever you want, but your code is more understandable when an outlet name bears some relationship to the item it represents. Make sure that the type field contains UI text field. Setting the type field to UI text field ensures that Xcode connects the outlet only to a text field. Make sure that the storage pop-up menu contains weak, which is the default value. After you make these settings, the popover should look like this. In the popover, click Connect. You accomplished two things by adding an outlet for the text field. You added appropriate code to the view controller class. Specifically, you added the following declaration to Hello World View Controller H. IB outlet is a special keyword that is used only to tell Xcode to treat the object as an outlet. It's actually defined as nothing, so it has no effect at compile time. Also, you cause the following statement to be added to the ViewDid unload method in Hello World View Controller M. The ViewDid unload method is supplied by the Xcode template you chose, and it's implemented for you by the UIKit framework. A view controller calls ViewDid unload when it needs to unload the views that it contains, which makes this method the right place to set the view's outlets to nil. You established a connection from the view controller to the text field. Establishing the connection between the view controller and the text field allows the text that the user enters to be passed to the view controller, as with the change greeting method declaration. Now add an outlet for the label and configure the connection. Establishing a connection between the view controller and the label allows the view controller to update the label with a string that contains the user's text. The steps you follow for this task are the same as the ones you followed to add the outlet for the text field, but with appropriate changes to the configuration. Make sure that Hello World View Controller H is still visible in the Assistant Editor. To add an outlet for the label, Control-drag from the label in the view to the method declaration.